Just 3 days to go until the historic presidential debate right here on CNN. Now, one of the things we have reported that Donald Trump has been doing to prepare is bouncing policy ideas off of folks being considered as his running mate. One of those politicians is Republican Congressman Byron Donalds from the state of Florida. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. I asked this question to Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. I'll ask you the exact same question. How responsible is Donald Trump for overturning Roe versus Wade?
Well, look, obviously, President Trump installed 3 Supreme Court justices. Those 3 justices were a part of changing Roe v. Wade and actually eliminating. I will also say that what the Supreme Court did in 1973 was actually something that it did not have the authority to do. Medical procedures like abortion are actually regulated at the state level, not the federal level. So what we're dealing with right now with abortion is that the states are going to weigh in. They're going to decide how abortions are going to be restricted and how they're going to be managed throughout the various states. California is going to have their law. Florida is going to have their law. Tennessee, Texas, New York. And then as things evolve in our country, we'll figure out the place where abortion is going to land in the United States.
And some states are banning abortion altogether. It sounds like you agree with Gretchen Whitmer that Donald Trump is responsible for overturning Roe versus Wade. You brought up the Supreme Court justices. Donald Trump even said, after 50 years of failure with nobody even coming close, I was able to kill Roe versus Wade. Do you agree with that?
Well, those are his words, so I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of the question is.
I just want to know if you think Donald Trump is responsible for fundamentally changing access to abortion in this country.
No, what he's responsible for is for people being able to weigh in on abortion. This abortion is a very personal topic. It's the most divisive topic in our politics. We all know this. And for 50 years, the Supreme Court took away the ability for the American people to weigh in on one of the most personal topics that does deal with politics in the United States. I think the one thing that's clear from the Dobbs decision is that abortion is not a federal issue. This is an issue that belongs in the states. Like I said, states are the ones that regulate medical procedures, not the federal government. And so this is going to be a situation where every state is going to make their decision, and citizens in those states have an ability to discuss abortion, figure out abortion regulation with their legislatures and with their governors.
So as I said, we've reported that Donald Trump is talking to some of his potential running mates, and you're one of them, about policy issues. I'm curious if you have discussed the Chilean model of Social Security with the former president.
No, we've not discussed that.
Have you talked about entitlement reform at all with him?
No, we've not discussed entitlement reform. President Trump has been clear. He wants to make sure that Social Security and Medicare are protected for all of the Americans who have been promised something by the federal government.
In the past, you have supported the Chilean model for Social Security. Is this something you do hope he considers?
Well, look, I will also tell you, I'm also 45 years old, so I've grown up in America not even thinking Social Security would be there for me. And if you ask a lot of people in my age group, they are skeptical about Social Security being around.
Right.
I think
the Chilean model is to
Americans,
privatize
30,
parts of it.
Well,
do you want him to consider
John,
privatizing part of Social Security? Okay.
I think that if you talk to younger Americans, they will tell you they are highly skeptical of whether Social Security and Medicare will be around for them. If you listen to the Congressional Budget Office, they're saying right now that both of those programs will be insolvent in 9 years. Congress is going to have to make some modest adjustments over the next several years that actually still protects seniors, protects the benefits that they have been promised, and that they will continue to get those benefits. But for a younger American like myself, for my sons who are my oldest son is 20 years old. For him, there are going to have to be some changes to those programs, very modest changes, so that way those programs can still be afforded going forward. You have to understand that right now, the number 2 spending item in the federal government is interest on the debt. It is number 2 in our government. It's more than we're paying for the Department of Defense. So we have some serious questions as a nation that we're going to have to confront, and playing politics is not going to answer those questions.
There was a report just out today, the New York Times, which cited a new analysis which showed that over Donald Trump's term in office, the 10-year projection on debt grew by $8.4 trillion. Under President Biden, it's trillion dollars. The federal debt grew by $8.4 trillion, the 10-year projection. Biden, $4.3 trillion. That's the projection. You take out COVID, it's still 2-1 Trump over Biden. So you just talked about the debt situation there is. What is President Trump said to you about how he intends to cut the debt?
Well, first of all, let's go back to what you just said. You said if you remove COVID, that the 10-year debt window between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is still 2-to-1. I will tell you right now, that math is simply not add up. Most of the debt incurred by Donald Trump does come from COVID-19 because the entire country's economy was shut down. And at that point, yes, Congress and the White House had a responsibility to step into that gap to make sure that Americans didn't just have their lives completely destroyed by COVID-19. It was a very tough period for our country. That being said, the Trump agenda when it comes to economics and when it comes to federal spending is one where we will have larger growth projections than we have today under Joe Biden because his growth is anemic. Number two, we will be cutting inflation. Joe Biden doesn't even want to talk about inflation except to say that right now the year-over-year growth is 3%. But if you look over his presidency, prices are up 20%. That is devastating for working families. It's devastating for seniors. This is why Americans are demanding a change from Joe Biden to Donald J. Trump. But number three, if you want to talk about debt projections, it is crystal clear Joe Biden has no concern about taxing and spending on the backs of the American people. Donald Trump will have a plan in order to be able to curtail federal spending to get our debt under control. COVID-19 was an anomaly, not just in terms of what it did for public health, but also what it did for our debts and for our deficits. That is something that we should not continue. And I will add, it is Joe Biden and his administration that wants to continue elevated federal spending using the COVID-19 spending levels as a model for federal spending going forward. That's simply not sustainable.
Congressman, I appreciate you being with us. Just to be clear, the math is the math by this organization that did this, reported in Axios and the New York Times today. It was the committee.
And I will tell you that organization is wrong because I'm on Capitol Hill. That organization is wrong.
All right. Well, they'll put their math up against yours. You guys can fight it out. But the fact of the matter is the budget debt projections grew more under Donald Trump, according to them, than President Biden. Representative Byron Donalds, thanks so much for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.